100 years of the Turkish Republic. Across the country, Turks are celebrating their centennial anniversary, a century after the abolition of the Ottoman Empire. What's been achieved since? And where is Türkiye on the global stage 100 years later? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the Turkish Republic. At its peak, the Ottoman Empire was the most powerful economic and military force in the world, stretching from the Danube River in Europe to the Nile in North Africa and as far east as the Caspian Sea. But that was back in the 1500s. Though the Ottomans would persevere for 6 centuries, their defeat in World War I would leave their empire dismantled. But out of its ashes rose the Turkish Republic. Led by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and the Turkish national movement, Türkiye defeated the Allied powers in their quest to partition the country during the War of Independence. Finally, on October 29, 1923, the Turkish Republic was founded. At home, it made free primary education compulsory and gave women full equal rights, including the right to vote. But it also changed Türkiye's position on the global stage. Here's a look now at Türkiye's biggest foreign policy accomplishments in the 100 years since its founding.
On the 29th of October 1923, after the War of Independence, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk founded the Turkish Republic. Much of the country's infrastructure had been destroyed in the fighting, and its human resources were depleted. In rebuilding his homeland, Atatürk knew from experience that peace on domestic and international fronts were vital for the survival of the nation. Keeping that principle alive, Türkiye has formed many important partnerships in the past 100 years, with the likes of the United Nations, the G20, and the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. Its partnership with the UN saw Türkiye assume a key mediator role in peacekeeping missions in Afghanistan. Türkiye provided consultancy to those in the conflict area and vital logistic and maintenance services. And when tensions between Ukraine and Russia were escalating, Türkiye insisted that representatives of the respective countries came together. At the time, parties involved called those meetings constructive. The peacekeeping and diplomacy goes hand in hand with Türkiye's humanitarian work. When Kashmir was hit by the 2005 earthquake, killing almost 90,000 people, then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan was the first foreign political leader to arrive on site. Türkiye provided help on a massive scale, sending economic aid and field hospitals. Lending a hand is a Turkish custom, but recently the country has undergone a technological revolution. Back in 1923, Türkiye was dependent on foreign countries for its arms and ammunitions. Early attempts to build a military hardware industry failed, but 100 years later, imports have been replaced by homegrown air, sea, and land combat vehicles, many of which are now exported to other countries. So the defense industry has become a major contributor to the Turkish national economy, and that is an economy that currently ranks among the world's top 20. Looking to the future, President Erdogan believes growth and advancements will be forming the backbone of Türkiye's millennium, his new plan to make sure the country remains a global power.
Let's look deeper now at where Türkiye has come from and, of course, at where it's going a century after the Republic's formation. Well, joining me now for that discussion are from Istanbul, Matthew Bryza, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. From Ankara, Murat Aslan, associate professor in security studies at Hasan Kalyoncu University. And also from Istanbul is Cagri Erhan, president of Altinbas University and a member of the Turkish Presidential Security and Foreign Policy Council. Thanks all so much for being with me. It has been a very long century, but let's narrow it down to some kind of key milestone moments that really determined where Türkiye stood and what its global position was. If we can go back maybe to World War II first and look at Türkiye's actual neutrality in that war and what it served for in balancing relationships during the Cold War to come. Murat, it was a very difficult balance given Türkiye was surrounded by several Soviet countries, but how was it managed and how is it serving Türkiye today?
Well, as you said, it was neutrality because once you decide on joining a war or be a party to a conflict, you must be aware of your capacities. Otherwise, it will not be realistic And once you step forward, that means you can easily fall in the hands of hostile attitudes. So the Second World War was a sort of transition. Think that Atatürk had died in 1938, and the heritage from Atatürk was peace at home and peace in the world. In this sense, Turkey, maybe being a conscious in terms of capacity and inherited foreign policy principles in general, well, stayed a bit away and acts accordingly per the global developments, regional developments, and state-wise.
Right. Let me ask Matthew about that. I mean, how much you think Turkey has stuck to Atatürk's legacy when it comes to foreign policy? His adage, of course, peace at home, peace in the world. I mean, specifically after the development of what happened in World War II, we did see Turkey join NATO, which did, in a sense, put it on polar opposite sides of the Soviet Union, but it wasn't necessarily a negative thing at all.
Yeah, I think Turkey has pretty much followed more or less Atatürk's famous adage, peace at home, peace in the world. And that was, as Murat was just saying, that was driven in part by, or at least the neutrality in World War II, by a lack of means, a lack of capacity, really to have a big impact. So in the early years, peace at home, peace in the world was about consolidating Turkey's independence and not being threatened by outside powers. So staying neutral in the Second World War, I mean, people from the United States like us, Andrea, find it kind of surprising that when there was such a clear evil in the world, Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany, that Turkey steered clear. But Turkey was adjusting its foreign policy goals to its capacity. And we see the same thing now in Ukraine, where so many people in the West would love Turkey to join the sanctions against Russia. But on the other hand, Turkey is positioning itself to be a useful, a very valuable mediator. And, Turkey had such a difficult relationship in the Ottoman years with the Russian Empire throughout the centuries. There was so many wars and, was maybe victorious one time. So Turkey has found a way to, search for peace in the world by consolidating peace at home and using peace in the world also to keep an independent Turkey viable.
Right. And given the kind of difficult geographical neighborhood it's been located in, it's done a pretty remarkable job at maintaining peace with all of the neighbors involved. Let me turn to Jara and ask what you identify as certain turning points in Turkey's foreign policy.
In fact, we can divide Turkish foreign policy of 100 years into four main time zones. The first one is already deliberated, is the Atatürk's time, it's the foundation time. Turkey tried to keep itself out of European rivalries and created some new kind of alliances with Balkan states against the Italian threat, for instance, and made an agreement with Soviet Union that time to develop its friendship and keep Soviets not to attack Turkey. But after the Second World War, there's a new period which will last until the early 1980s. It is the period in which Turkey tried to keep itself under the Atlantic Alliance umbrella to prevent any kind of Soviet intervention to its territories, which was a clear threat because after the Second World War, Soviets openly asked for some territorial parts of Turkey and tried to establish some bases in Turkish straits. And in order to prevent this kind of hostilities, Turkey became a member of NATO. And until the early 1980s, Turkey was an active member of this alliance. But after 1980s, the world was changing. In 1989, the wall fell, the Berlin Wall, and we came to end the Cold War. And starting from late 1980s up to early 2000s, Turkey tried to diversify its foreign policy while keeping its Western alliance as a main backbone of its foreign policy. Turkey tried to establish new kind of relations with the former Soviet republics, particularly with the Turkic states. Right. And starting from the 21st century, now we are in another period of time, maybe one of the most important turning points of world history, we are passing through, now new dynamics and balances are being created. The world leadership and the world leadership structure is under construction, and Turkey is trying to find a way for the future of its foreign policy.
And where do you see that way going in this new world order for Turkey? And I mean, talk about as well, how Turkey's relationship with the Soviet Union did inform its relationship with Moscow today, as well as with those former Soviet states, particularly in Central Asia, where Turkey has very strong linguistic and cultural common heritage.
Turkish foreign policy has some structural determinants. We cannot change them. For 100 years, they were always very effective factors in defining Turkish foreign policy. One of them is the geography and geopolitical location. Where Turkey stands, locates, is called Five Seas Basin. We are surrounded by 5 seas, 5 strategic and very volatile regions of the world. It is Black Sea, Caspian, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and the Mediterranean. So in this volatile area, Turkey always took into consideration of the internal developments of its neighboring countries, but also security concerns also shaped its foreign policy, as well as the global actors' policies in the region. And Turkey is also located in some of the most important fault lines of the world history. Turkey is between East and West. Turkey is between Christianity and Islam. Turkey is between developing countries, the North and the South, and the developed countries, the North. Therefore, all these factors, determinants, also force Turkey's policymakers to find new kinds of relationships through cultural, through economic, and through political alliances. Right. And one of them is, of course, the Turkic world. But on the other hand, Turkey is a candidate country for European Union. Turkey is a member country to the Council of Europe and a member to the NATO alliance.
Yeah, it's remarkable the kinds of connections that exist for a country as diverse as Turkey, with every corner really of the region and the world. Murat, let me ask you about the major alliances really that Turkey is a member of, not least of course NATO, but also the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, the Organization of Turkic States, as well as the G20.
Currently, it reflects what Professor Erhan says. Turkey is in between civilizations, in between differing and contradicting interests, and in between differing organizations or sphere of influences. If you check the Middle East, it does have different regional systems inside itself. If you go to Caucasus, well, we have a Russian reality over there. On the other hand, there is a great competition between Russia and the United States, mainly on Georgia, or Balkans, or Black Sea. So I had listed the number of problems Turkey is currently dealing with. And believe in me, it's more than 30. And once any problem pops up in the close vicinity, only the priorities change, not the list. In this sense, Turkey must be an active member of all alliances, all organizations, very active in engaging with the problems, because at the end of the day, something happens, then Turkey will feel an impact on it. And in the meantime, once there happens an escalation, Turkey does have two different options: be away or be a party or subject of it. And I believe that Turkish option currently is, first of all, depending to the degree of threat, perceived threat, I believe, to be a neutral one, having an initiative by an open gate diplomacy that requires a facilitation mission. So once you are a member of an organization or a group of states with similar agendas, it's much more easier. Otherwise, if you become a subject of it, that means, well, you have to spend a lot, human resources, military resources, etc.
Matthew, let me turn to you. I mean, a big question now for you, carrying off, talking about the relationships within the region and various organizations. Let's look at Turkey's relationship with the United States. It's obviously ebbed and flowed, to say the least, but bring us through some of the high points and low points of the last years and assess actually where you think it is now.
Sure. I mean, high points in the beginning, of course, included participation in the Korean War as a U.S. ally and part of the UN coalition, and then joining NATO, as we've said already. And throughout, as my colleagues were saying just now, the professors, throughout this period up until the late 1980s, the United States and the rest of the NATO alliance looked at Turkey as the cornerstone of the southern flank of NATO. It was the bulwark against Soviet expansion, with the historical desire on the part of Moscow or St. Petersburg or wherever the capital of Russia was at the time to control the Turkish Straits. And then, as we know, the U.S. has based nuclear weapons in Turkey. There were missile systems as well. So Turkey was really important in terms of containment of the Soviet Union. But then when the Soviet Union collapsed and the Soviet bloc was no more, yes, Turkey was looking for a new role in the world. And as it looked to the Turkic countries to the east, to Azerbaijan, to the Caspian Sea, it saw a great opportunity. An opportunity to position Turkey as a crucial transport hub for oil and natural gas leaving the Caspian Sea, not via the monopoly of pipelines of Russia, and not through the Strait of Hormuz, which the U.S. didn't like because of Iran, but via Turkey through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline and the South Caucasus natural gas pipeline. Those pipelines never would have happened without the strategic vision of Turkey, together with Azerbaijan and Georgia, and never would have happened without the very active diplomatic support of the United States. And for me, that was a real high point in our collaboration, where together, Ankara, Washington, Baku, Tbilisi, saw a huge strategic opportunity that made sense also for investors and for international energy companies. And we were able to achieve some amazing infrastructure projects. That's a high point. A low point for sure was March 1st, 2003, when the United States was planning to invade Iraq. Turkey had warned us. I worked in the White House at the time. In the spirit of peace at home, peace in the world, the Turkish military gave our military a list of like 250 questions about what are you going to do after you defeat Saddam's army? How are you going to rebuild the country? We did not have good answers. And then on March 1st, of course, 2003, when the Grand National Assembly did not vote to permit the U.S. to invade Iraq via Turkey, that kicked off a steady and intense decline in relations between the two countries. But last point is, in recent years, they've been improving ever since Joe Biden came to power. For Biden, Ukraine was always a really important issue, and NATO is a centerpiece of everything he does in foreign policy. So Turkey is a logical partner, such an important member of NATO, second largest military, and a country that's crucial to what's going to happen, to the outcome of Putin's war on Ukraine.
I just have to ask you quickly, though. I mean, we kind of skipped over Syria. Given Turkey was kind of, well, very much proven right with its stance on Iraq, and then to see the U.S. and Turkey kind of fall out again over Syria policy, it seems as if Turkey managed to prove that there was no reason for the U.S. and Turkey to be on different pages in its approach to the Syria war. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I think it's not appreciated in Washington. Was that to me? Yeah. In Washington, that's not appreciated. In Washington, the narrative has been so distorted. And whereas in Idlib province, Turkey intervened in retaliation for a Russian and Assad forces strike that killed a bunch of Turkish soldiers and civilians, it's only Turkey that was ready to use military force against the Russians, and did successfully in Idlib, where it compelled Putin to sue for peace, and also in Libya. So instead of seeing these confrontations by Turkey of Russian military aggression, many in Washington still flip around the debate and say, oh, it's Turkey that somehow was the aggressor. Very strange.
Yeah. Jara, let me come to you. I mean, we were looking at the United States. We also have to look at the EU and how Turkey has tried to deal with that relationship, not just in respect to EU membership and some of the controversy there, but also the refugee policy. That has been a massive, point of discontent between the EU and Turkey. Turkey has managed millions and millions of refugees, cooperated with Europe as much as possible in keeping the flow limited, and then Turkey has basically been left with a massive burden But still, if we look forward to look back, do you believe Turkey will definitely prove itself to have been on the right side of history in its EU and refugee policy?
Half of our 100 years of republic, our foreign policy is dealing with the EU membership. It started with Turkey's application for candidacy in 1959, and we signed an agreement of customs union in 1963. So after these decades, Turkey is still trying to become a EU member, but there are some very important pending questions, and they should be solved. We can underline three of them. One of them is the restart of accession negotiations, because since 2015, no single chapter was opened or temporarily closed, so it is almost frozen. We are formally a candidate state, but the accession process doesn't move. The second one is, of course, the updating of customs union. The customs union agreement was signed in 1995. Since then, many things have changed. Now, Turkey has no privilege in terms of trade with the EU, and some other trade partners, some third-party countries like Mexico and South Korea have more privileges than Turkey as a candidate country. So Turkey is asking for customs union updating. And the third one is, of course, the removal of visa regime, and it is very related with the immigration policy, because in 2016, Turkey and European Union signed two protocols, which are parallel to each other. Turkey then accepted to keep the immigrants in Turkey, to take all kinds of measures, including when they are sent back from European Union, not to send back to European Union countries. But at the same time, European Union promised Turkey to remove the visa, which is applied to Turkish citizens. But since then, 7 years elapsed, the visa system is not eased, but in many terms, it has become more difficult for the Turkish students to take a visa for the European Union countries. Therefore, I think Turkey and the European Union is at the threshold of a very important decision to put all aspects of bilateral relations on the table and decide whether to renew the accession process or to speak about some other sort of status for Turkey. Turkey geographically will not go anywhere else. Turkey will stay here as a neighbor to the European Union. But Brussels should decide whether Turkey become a country in the European Union or just a country neighboring to the European Union.
Okay, Murat, if you'd like to comment on that, go ahead. But I also was curious about where, this, I almost want to say standoff, because at points it did become that, on refugee policy. How it's affected the Turkey-EU relationship. And again, if history will treat Turkey slightly, at least, or maybe a lot more kindly, in its treatments of refugees in a time of very devastating wars across the region, where Turkey responded and pumped up its humanitarian measures in a way that the EU did not necessarily.
Turkey's official policy for the immigrants is very easy. It's open door policy. So if any is endangered in terms of security, well, international law is very clear. So they will be hosted. On the other hand, international law requires another thing. If this man or woman, doesn't matter, if they're in danger and wants to go another country as a destination, ultimate destination, they must be facilitated. So I think we have to stick to the arrangements, international arrangements. On the other hand, once you have a chat with any European official, any European epistemic community, intellectual, well, immigration has become something over there that builds up fear. Well, I respect that they are in search of identity security, but if you sign something as a treaty, as an agreement, you have to, obey it. You have to apply it. So in this case, I believe immigration, it had been resolved by a mutual agreement between the EU and Turkey, because they demand individuals with qualifications. I respect it, but it must be something that all terms of any agreement must be applied, and not only the EU, but interests of both parties, Turkey and EU, must be respected. And this is the expectation of Turkey. By the way, there's one thing really important. Mostly, Syrians are perceived as potential immigrants to the EU countries. No, it's not. Turkey receives a lot of people from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Pakistan, and also Africa, and sometimes China, interestingly. So the agreement between EU and Turkey to resolve this issue, or to identify how to proceed it, well, it must be clear and very comprehensive.
That will have to be the final word. Unfortunately, for this edition of The Newsmakers, I'd like to thank all three of my panelists really so much for being with us. Great to have you all, and our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.